thank you again to everyone who is here. We are so excited to be back for our third Interfaith Vegan panel. For those of you who don't know, my name is Emma Goldblatt, and I'm the program manager for the nonprofit Peace Advocacy Network, also known as PAN. PAN's mission is to promote a peaceful existence through veganism, social justice, and respect for the Earth's inhabitants and resources. PAN strives for the absence of violence in the lives of people and animals by eliminating oppression and inequity. To this end, PAN is committed to fostering, cultivating, and preserving a culture of diversity and inclusion among everyone we work with. So thank you so much. And we are also being co-sponsored by Animal Interfaith Alliance, the Interfaith Vegan Coalition, and In Defense of Animals. So we also have Barbara from AIA here with us, so I will let her say a few words.
Hi, well, I'm delighted to be here working with the Peace Advocacy Network and, of course, our lovely friends at the Interfaith Vegan Coalition. The Animal Interfaith Alliance is an alliance of the world's most influential faith-based animal advocacy organisations, and we speak out on the moral treatment of animals by drawing on the combined wisdom of all faiths and worldviews. We also aim to promote social harmony by bringing the faith groups together on an issue they all share a concern for. Our activities include animal advocacy and education. I'm delighted to say that one of our patrons, Charanjit, is one of the speakers tonight. We've actually been quite busy this week because we've had the UK Interfaith Week. And I know Charanjit's been doing a lot of events. And also we're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. We were founded in 2014, so that's our week. So thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you for joining us, and congrats on the 10 years. Now, Lisa, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Thanks so much, Emma. As Emma mentioned, I'm Lisa Levinson, Campaigns Director for In Defense of Animals and co-founder of the Interfaith Vegan Coalition. We help animal activists and spiritual leaders to bring vegan values to spiritual, ethical, and religious communities. Our coalition provides faith-based tools, such as our religion-specific vegan advocacy kits, to help all faith and secular wisdom traditions practice the ideals of nonviolence, loving kindness, and harmlessness toward all animals. The coalition is comprised of 60 member organizations, including some of the folks here and PAN, 5 allied organizations, and 1 partner organization that Barbara represents here, Animal Interfaith Alliance. We all work in harmony together for a common cause. And each year we bestow a Homo Ahimsa Award to honor those who demonstrate how vegan living can co-create a world of peace, partnership, and loving kindness by ending violence and domination of people, animals, and the earth. Throughout November and December, we are partnering with the vegan community to offer love and thrive through the holidays with virtual programs to support activist self-care during this challenging season. So we're delighted to be here, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. So along with Barbara and Lisa, we also have our 4 amazing panelists today, the first of which is Charanjit Ajit Singh, and she is currently the chair of the International Interfaith Center, Oxford, and Hans Lau, Friends of Faith, as well as vice president of the World Congress of Faiths. She serves on the editorial board of Faith Initiative magazine and has been recognized for her contributions to administration and governance in the UK, including an award from the Mayor of London as the Sikh Woman of Achievement. Over 4 decades, she has lectured at global conferences, contributed to numerous publications, and authored Wisdom of Sikhism. An educator by profession, she has held roles as a lecturer, principal, and Ofsted inspector, while also serving as a non-executive director on health boards. Next, we have Altamush Saeed. and he is a BIPOC award-winning Pakistani lawyer, activist, and educator specializing in interspecies justice. He currently teaches Pakistan's first animal law advocacy course and is set to introduce international animal law in 2024. A passionate advocate, he co founded Pakistan's first dedicated animal and environmental law firm and the charity Doings Foundation. He has received numerous awards, including the 2023 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Trailblazer Award from the Humane Society of the United States. He also serves as Deputy Director of the World Moot on International Law and Animal Rights, a junior fellow at the Global Research Network UK, and an advisor on several animal rights initiatives. He's currently producing Pakistan's first film series on animal rights, focusing on farm animals. So, welcome Altamush. Thank you so much for being here. Next, we have Silesh Rao. Dr. Silesh Rao is the founder of Climate Healers, a nonprofit dedicated towards healing the Earth's climate. He's an environmentalist with a background in systems engineering. Not only did he revolutionize internet connections, but he's also a passionate advocate, ad, activist, which stands for human, earth, and animal liberation. He has promised his granddaughter Kamaya that the world will be largely vegan before she turns 16 in 2026 so that people will stop eating her relatives, the animals. And so thank you for being here, Silesh. And lastly, we have Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz, who has twice been named one of America's top rabbis by Newsweek and has been named by The Forward as one of the 50 most influential Jews and one of the most inspiring rabbis in America. He's the author of 27 books on Jewish ethics, and his writings have appeared in diverse outlets among many secular and religious publications. He has served as speaker at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and as a Rothschild Fellow in Cambridge, UK. He received a master's from Harvard as well as Yeshiva University and his doctorate from Columbia University. He was ordained as a rabbi by Yeshivat Hovevei Torah, along with 2 private ordinations in Israel. He serves as the founder and president of Shemayim Jewish Animal Advocacy. His wife Shoshana and their 4 children live in Scottsdale, Arizona. They're also foster parents. So thank you also to Rabbi Shmuley for being here. All right, so that's it for our 4 panelists, and I will make sure to put links where to learn more about their work wherever this video is posted. But with that, we are actually just going to jump right in. Oh, one last thing for our amazing registrants who are here with us today and our viewers. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can after I ask the questions that we have already planned. So yes, thank you so much. But the first question I'm going to ask is, how does your faith inform your view of veganism? And we are going to start with Charanjit. Oh, you're muted. Charanjit, you're muted.
Trying to. Okay.
Oh, there we go. We can hear you now.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for your invite. I would like to start off by saying that the views I express are my own, and those are based on my own understanding of my Sikh faith and scripture.
Thank you.
Okay. And I call myself a lacto-vegan. We have just celebrated 555th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak, who was born in Pakistan, by the way, the founder, on Friday the 15th. And of course, we have had 3 whole days of celebrations. And that would have happened everywhere in the globe, wherever the Sikhs are. And this day, or these days, are very much food-based days as well as spiritual-based days. So free food for everyone who visits the Sikh Gurudwara, and that free food consists of vegetarian, I wouldn't use the word vegetarian in that sense, but totally plant-based food with milk and milk products. And that's been going on for the last 500 odd years, wherever the Sikhs have been. And in Harimandir Sahib, the Golden Temple, 100,000 meals are served a day. So many people attend. So, free community kitchen, hot meal, all plant based. And I'm also reminded of a couplet in a holy book, Guru Granth Sahib, जो सब में एक खुदाए कहिए था सो क्यों मुर्गी मारे. If God is there in every being, then why kill a chicken? And our morning prayer, we are reminded that whosoever does the decapitation of any animal commits the crime of killing. Hence, my background is lacto-vegan, which I have followed in the UK, even though it had been very, very difficult initially, because one meat and two veg were the things which were served and are continuing to be served in many schools and colleges. And my kids, poor kids in some ways, people felt, had to sit in a corner with their meal provided from home. And of course, there was quite a lot of stigma attached to that. So from there to now, where at least a third of people in Britain think about veganism is quite a progress, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to hear how does your faith inform your view on veganism, from Altamush.
Thank you so much, Emma. I would just start with two acknowledgements as well, that these views are my own. And the second one is I'm not an expert, I'm a learner. I'm here to learn, and that's how I'm going to express what I'm going to say now. So I'm a Muslim vegan, and that is something that we normally don't see. But that is because of normally the context that's taught in mainstream education in Islam, where there are several contexts where you're allowed to eat animals, but at the other end, there is no mandatory requirement to actually eat animals. That's where the veganism point kind of aligns with Islam. And secondly, there are quite a few requirements within the religion. The main ones, of course, are that all Muslims essentially are this have this status called Khalifa. So the term Khalifa in Islam is kind of like the leader, of the entire movement. It's kind of like the Pope in Christianity and so on and so forth in other religions. But every Muslim has that responsibility. And the thing is, that responsibility comes with accountability as well, and extending the entire mercy principle about God and His creation. Because the thing is, normally when we associate a religion, we associate with its subjects. And that is normally beings who pray to God, essentially, right? But there are references within the Quran which mentions that animals, just like human beings, pray as well. Their form of prayer is different. And a good example of that is actually, for example, a frog. If you've ever seen a frog, there's a sound that it consistently makes its entire life. That's essentially his form of prayer, where he's reciting the word of God essentially. And for that reason, a frog was actually actually the most beloved animal to the Prophet Muhammad, who is the figure who brought Islam as the messenger within the religion. And so animals have their own way of praying. Another good example is, of course, a camel. If you've ever seen him bow down, that's a form of prostration. It's just different. We just don't see it, and it's everywhere around us in nature. So therefore, animals, just like human beings, are subjects of this religion as well. And another principle that I want to connect with is that the Quran directly mentions animals as in chapter 6, verse 38, that they are communities like you. The word community in Islam is actually very important because it translates to the term ummah. And that's an Arabic word. But an ummah essentially means for whom the religion is created. And referring animals as an ummah essentially means that animals are equally subjects of the same religion and they have their own rights that derive from it. The last point, even though I have so many, is of course about the Prophet Muhammad. So whenever he is referenced in the Quran and through his life, it is always mentioned that he was sent as a symbol of mercy for all mankind, for all humankind, and all that exists. and that included animals as well. So it was never associated to be just about human beings, because that's the normally anthropocentric framework we often hear about in Islam. So there's a lot more. There's alignment, and there can be a lot of space for advocating for veganism, because when you think about your connection with life and quite a few other things that I don't have a time to share, but they kind of connect us more to veganism, more to values where we align with the mercy principle of God and how He created everybody. So that's like the foundational framework, and there's a lot more in it, but this is like the very basic version of it. And I hope that helps people understand or at least make some connections.
Thank you for sharing. Now, Silesh, how does your faith inform your view of veganism?
Yeah, as the previous speaker said, my faith is very personal. So I'm going to express my views. And in our faith, the foundation of our faith is the sacredness of all life, and that all life should be treated as one family. So we call it Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So the entire universe is one family. And that you are supposed to see God in every living being and in all creation. And you have to treat everything as sacred. So that's how I even grew up, being taught this. But then I was consuming dairy. I was consuming dairy because I was told it is necessary to consume dairy. And when I started working on the environment, I realized that it is no longer necessary to consume dairy. And if it's not necessary to consume something and it is impacting an animal, you need to stop it. So I immediately went vegan on the spot when I discovered that. And this was in 2008, about 16 years ago. Now there are a lot of vegans in the Hindu community as well. And it's a growing movement, as you know. And it's completely in alignment with, I believe, with all faiths, because there is not a single faith that says, go exploit an animal unnecessarily. So this is why I think that all of us are coming together in this Interfaith Vegan panel with the same message, that if there is no need to exploit animals, please let us stop doing it and let us restore the planet to its original beauty. Thank you so much.
Sharing. Thanks. Lastly, Rabbi Shmuley, how does your faith inform your view of veganism?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm just so inspired by these panelists, and this conversation feels like exactly the space in the world I need to be in right now, given all the chaos and noise. Are spaces that promote compassion and collaboration and bridge building for a less violent world. And I love that it's Peace Advocacy Network striving for peace, shalom and salam. Shalom is not just that word for peace, but a name of God in Judaism. That the dream is that we can have a world without violence. And in the dream where the lion will lie down with the lamb, coming to the realization that actually humanity is the lion. We are the ones who have to lie down. We are the ones who are posing that great threat to all species. In Judaism, the Garden of Eden is deemed a vegan diet. And as part of a fall, so to speak, a fall from this garden, we lose that utopia. And of course, the term vegan is only less than a century old, but the ethos is there millennia old. In the Hebrew scriptures, a concession was given towards eating animal products after the flood, but like Altamush said about Islam, it was not a mandate to eat it, merely a permission. And I would argue that the game has changed in the era we're in now, partially because of the horrific nature of factory farming, where almost all of these products come from, partially because of what we now know that we didn't know before, and partially that what we now have access to that we didn't have access to. And so I think the highest manifestation of Jewish values is to keep kosher, and that keeping kosher today means being vegan.
Thank you so much. Okay, we are going to move on to the next question for you all, which is, what does compassion for animals look like in your religion, and what are humanity's responsibilities towards animals in your faith, if there are any? And so we are going to, again, start with Charanjit.
Thank you. In the Sikh faith, love of God and love of creation are closely interlinked, and we humans are the stewards. And as stewards, we have the responsibility to cherish and safeguard the creation by caring for it. God's justice demands that of the whole of humanity. And let's not forget that we are part of God's creation. And our position as sentient beings entrusts us to abide by God's command and to fulfill our duty as protectors of not only animals, but revere them as God has given us the freedom to think about that in that way. And I'll just quote in line from the scripture: humans, trees, holy places, spheres and solar systems, life forms, egg-born, womb-born, earth-born, sweat-born. Only God knows their existence in oceans, mountains, everywhere. Nanak says God created them all and takes care of them, and we need to take care of them too. So there is no difference between the created and the creator, as the creator lives within us. And if we think of it in that context, the creator lives also within the animals. And there are thousands of references in our holy book and stories related to the lives of the Sikh gurus about this. And we also feel, and there are many examples there in the Holy Scripture as well, that animals can teach us. For example, the elephant, the deer, the fish, the moth have only one vice each that attracts them, like lust, smell, taste, and flame or light. And we humans have five. This is what my faith says. And those are Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Ahankar, which is lust, anger, greed, attachment, and ego. And think about it. They have only one and we have only five. So we need to think we have much more work to do in order to learn from animals. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Altamush, what does compassion for animals look like in your religion?
Thank you so much for that wonderful question. So I will speak with a few references coming directly from the Quran. So just for context, the Quran and the Hadith, which is basically the life of the Prophet, they're essentially the primary sources of Islam. And so the Quran mentions explicitly, and these are words directly from there, He laid out the earth for all beings. That is one reference which basically speaks about how important it is for us to acknowledge that we are not the only ones living here. And that's where I normally derive the principle of interspecies justice, which is basically understanding that we're not alone here, and therefore this anthropocentric framework, kind of doesn't apply anymore. It has changed. And the other reference that I want to give to you is basically from the floods that happened at the time of Prophet Noah. And so the Quran mentions that to the Prophet that take into the ark a pair from every species. The idea about that is, of course, every animal is important, but the other one, the main one, is that life cannot exist without them. And they have this sacred space in this circle of life, where animals and the environment have that status without which, life cannot exist and human beings cannot be a part of it. And specifically when it comes to veganism, we actually have to connect a lot of arguments. Like one of them is, of course, the rights of nature argument. So Islam also talks about the environment, but more from a rights of nature perspective. It says that in addition, to the role of a Khalifa, where you are basically responsible for the entire religion, there is another status that's really important. That's basically about trusteeship. And the Quran says that the planet has been given, to the Muslims, or those who practice the faith, from a trusteeship perspective. The idea is that they have to understand that they don't own anything. The owner of everything is God, and therefore this trust is just about us holding it, and the beneficiaries of that trust is actually all life. That includes animals, that includes the environment, and that includes humans themselves. And when you violate these trusts, disasters happen, climate change happens, which is something we're seeing all across of us. And the thing is, this is basically the basic accountability mechanism that exists when we kind of go with how nature is supposed to be perceived, and when we violate that trust towards other beings. The other main thing that's very important to understand about Islam is that it directly forbids factory farming explicitly. And that's because it forbids cutting of the tails of or the slitting of ears of animals or keeping them in confined spaces and not understanding what's really happening. And the one last reference that connects all of this is that the Quran says in chapter 22, verse 37, that neither their flesh reaches Allah nor their blood. It is your piety that reaches Him. So it was never about, even doing charity or even doing a slaughter for somebody else. The idea that we have to understand it's not the meat that's going to reach him, but it's basically going to be the intent. And given how the world has changed, given how environment has become so much important, the way we treat our animals, what we put on a plate essentially is going to decide whether the person sitting next to us or people within this very webinar are going to be alive or not, because it's all connected because of food system harms and everything else. Information that we now know, as Rabbi Shmuley mentioned, we didn't know that before. So we have to give, people benefit of the doubt, but now it's even high responsibility. So what you can do is instead of doing that, you can do a different kind of work, like, starting a school or helping somebody who is in need in different ways. And that's where the whole veganism concept comes in, because firstly it's not mandatory to eat animals, and then there's a whole different pathway when it connects to the rights of others. So it's not just about our relationship with animals. That's not just veganism. I think veganism is something beyond, which helps us connect how humans interact or behave or understand how intrinsic rights, not just animals but the environment has as well, because not following veganism also harms the environment, also harms the animals, and then also harms the humans as well. So it's a bit more than that. And these are direct references from the religion. So I don't want to make it more complicated. I apologize, but wanted to share these. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sailesh, what does compassion for animals look like in your religion?
In our religion is the religion of the sacred cow, as it's known, but in reality, it's the sacredness of all life. It's not just the cow. And it begins with the second shloka in the Upanishads. The Sri Isa Upanishad says that take only what you need and no more from the earth, because the earth does not belong to you but to the Lord. It is the same principle that Altamash just enunciated in Islam. And so compassion for animals in our religion is basically compassion. Compassion is undifferentiated. It's compassion for all life, for all creation. It's a way of being, and in our religion, we have this origin story called the wishing tree story that is the equivalent of the Adam and Eve story in the Bible. And in that story, they enunciate how compassion comes about. Basically, it's seeing the suffering of others, and especially human beings who are wishing under the tree, who are suffering, because when you wish for yourself, you get the opposite of what you wish for as well. You get what you wish for and the opposite of what you wish for. So the suffering happens because it's a selfish wishing that's happening under the tree. But if you wish for the benefit of others, and you say, I don't want anything from this tree for myself, then you can be perfectly happy wishing under the tree, and everyone will be happy because of your wishing. And to get to that level, you need to have become compassionate and detached in how you operate under the tree. So to me, it explained how why the knowledge tree story in the Bible cast human beings off from Eden, because they ate the apple themselves. And so in that example, basically as human beings, we have access to this wishing tree, this knowledge tree. And we should be using this knowledge tree and this wishing tree for the benefit of other species, not for ourselves. And when we do that, we are going to be forced to do that very soon, because the environment is, as Altamash said, is providing us feedback that we are doing something wrong. And we are going to be forced to do that. And when we do that, we will start restoring the planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Rabbi Shmuley, what does compassion for animals look like in your religion?
Thank you so much. And by the way, friends, I know we have folks here in the Zoom. I know this is live streamed. I know people are asking for the recording, but I hope everyone will promote this recording, because we have such great scholars here who are sharing such deep insights about their faiths. And we need a revolution. And speaking of the revolution, I do think that a big part of compassion is proximity, getting close. And for some of us, that means we can go to a farm. We can, one of the many reasons why people love dogs and cats more than they love cows and chickens is because of how close they are and their relationship to them. So that proximity is so important. But there's another way to get proximate if you're not like me and want to go to a farm, and that is to watch Dr. Sailesh Rao's films. And I'm going to post them in the chat here, that to be sure that you know about these, because maybe you've seen one or two, but we should see all of them. He has been an executive producer of The Human Experiment, Cowspiracy, What the Health, Prayer for Compassion, They're Trying to Kill Us, The End of Medicine, The Land of Ahimsa, Animals, A Parallel History, Milked, Christspiracy, which is just out now and available, and I Could Never Go Vegan. And I put his link there if you want to learn more as well. For those who are not going to get physically proximate, this is another way for us to get a little closer to some of these realities. And I think that's so important now, because there's a study out of the University of Michigan that shows in America over the last few decades, the capacity for empathy has dropped deeply for difference. But the most obvious one is on this front right here. It's astonishing to me, or that if one truly knew what was happening, that they would affirm this lifestyle. So the only way I can remain charitable about human beings is to assume they truly don't understand. Because if they did, they could not maintain this commitment. So in Hebrew, the word for compassion is rachamim. Altamush, I think it's similar in Arabic, right? How do you say it, compassion? Rachamim?
I need to check. I'm sorry.
Okay, because you speak, forgive my ignorance. What language, you speak Pakistani?
Yeah, I do, and a little bit of Arabic, but not that expert in Arabic, actually.
Okay. So anyways, I think there is a parallel between those two religions on that. In any case, I'm sorry to put you on the spot there, but yeah, maybe if someone else knows, you can share. So rachamim is the word for compassion in Hebrew, and the word for a womb, a mother's womb, is rechem. So the mother's womb is this holding space of compassion that all life seeks to return to, this safe, loving holding space. For us to create a world that holds that. Now, I want to share one Talmudic passage here on the side. The Talmud is the work of the rabbis 1,500 years ago, and they're critical of their own scholars. So here's what it says here. There was a calf being taken away to slaughter when it ran away and hid his head under Rabbi Judah the prince's robes. Now, he was not just one of the average rabbis of the Talmud. He was like the writer of the Mishnah, the compiler of the Mishnah. Big deal. And the calf cried as it hides under his robes. And this great rabbi doesn't seem so great in this moment. He said, "Go, for this you were created." Right? A very anthropocentric worldview. You are created simply for the slaughter, for the benefit of humans. They said, the angels, I assume, since he has no pity, let us bring suffering upon him. Right? What you call karma, perhaps. One day, Rabbi's maidservant was sweeping the house, saw some young weasels lying there, and made to sweep them away. But he changed now. He said to her, "Let them be. It is written, and God's mercy is over all God's works." They said, "Since he is compassionate, let us be compassionate to him." This teaching in the Talmud over 1,500 years ago of his learning how we suffer more when we inflict suffering, right? And we will be liberated, each of us, when we can commit to this compassion.
Thank you so much for sharing. So that moves us to our third question, which is, People must consume food in order to survive. Does your religion offer any guidance on how humans should nourish themselves? Does that guidance point towards any greater ideas, such as harmony, interdependence, purity, or compassion? And is there a name for this system? So we will start again with Charanjit.
Thank you. Uh, I think I touched on some of it when the first question was being uh, addressed. Um, and I cannot help but say that in my parents' generation, my father's generation, grandfather's generation, farming was very much part of the rural community and still is in some ways, uh, where animals were partners in the way food was grown. And I'm not talking about meat eating, I'm talking about preparing the ground and putting seeds in the soil and those sort of things. Um, and of course, since then, what I'm pretty well shocked about, recently I went to India, that factory farming, which we didn't know, is coming about in a big way. And it's a huge concern, particularly when we are getting away from the harmonious relationships which we had as rural communities. Um, in relation to my own faith, um, you know, animals, whenever animals died, who were the ones who were being looked after, who supported us as partners, there was this huge, huge sorrow and always a prayer for them. And I think alongside the Hindu tradition, the Sikh tradition believes that there are 8,400,000 life forms which are in existence. And if we are not compassionate, if we are not dealing with life in a compassionate, loving, kindness sort of way, then we may end up being in the cycle of birth and death. So it's in our own interest to be compassionate. It's an own interest to be in harmonious relationships with others, but also it's in our own interest to eat plant-based diet. And there is a lot of guidance in our scripture about not causing harm, but to build harmonious relationships with nature and animals. And it's an interdependent life, depending upon they protect us, we protect them in that way. And I have seen in the Golden Temple, there are some trees, and on top of those trees, at night, you would not see a single branch which is not covered with birds. In the morning, when the prayers begin, it's a beautiful sound from those birds as if they are praying alongside us. It is well worth listening to. So, in terms of partaking vegan food and not causing harm to others. I mean, the words which are used, I think, in the Hindu and the Sikh way are Vaishno and Shakahari. So basically, eating plant-based food. So again, we are advised not to eat things which cause us harm, and meat eating is considered something which would cause us harm. So let's avoid that. And it says in words like Baba Hur Khana Khushi Khwar Jit Kha De Tan Peediye Man Mile. And there are also prayers which are about, some people making prayers about what would they want for their daily needs. Praying for food, which is corn or wheat, lentils, those sort of things, and vegetables, and not praying for, a killed animal and then eating. So it's quite different in that way. And I have already talked about Langar the Gurdwara and the feeding there. And it's absolutely important that the food is cooked in a way where purity of that food is maintained, sanctity of that food is maintained, and it's prepared with love and with prayer. And that's, I think, if we are people of faith, we should be thinking in terms of that. And of course, sharing of food with others, and not necessarily with others, but um, animals are included in that sharing. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Altamush, how about you?
Yeah, so there's so much that I can say, but I'm gonna make it very easy. So the process, firstly, when you talk about factory farming, the thing is, which is basically concentrated animal feeding operations for those who don't know, where animals are confined in the millions in a single space, basically on a basic premise to save land, but a result cause an insane amount of cruelty towards animals, towards humans and the environment, which is why, we're having these disasters. These kind of things did not exist at the time when when Islam actually came. This was in 700 AD. So this whole invention was industrial capitalization of the whole thing. It was never intended to be aligned with Islam. And the way with we do industrial animal agriculture, it is something that's completely incompatible with religion because there is a guideline available as to how this has to happen. As I mentioned before, there is no mandatory requirement to eat animals in Islam. So veganism kind of aligns with the religion, and of course you have to have your additional values and you have to understand what the religion really is. So it's kind of at the end of the day personal choice. But from a factory farming perspective, there's a very well-defined process. Part of it is called halal, which all of us know about. There is another part that many of you might not about, which is the tayyib part. So these are two basic requirements. So halal is basically the process as to how it actually happens. So the animal itself has to be of a certain species and type before it's actually halal. But then there's an entire process which is extremely meticulous, for example, and that begins with the animal is essentially born. Because the thing is, you cannot slaughter an injured animal in Islam. And what really happens is these animals are brought in from thousands of miles from different cities across the world, and even on ships and here and so on and so forth, which basically puts in an insane amount of mental and physical pain when they're transported. In my country, there are no laws at all on animal transport, which is something that's incompatible. Then, of course, when the animal is brought in, you have to provide them a few basic resources, which is access to food and water and everything else. And the animals must not even see each other when they're being kept because mental pain is something that flows from one being to another. That's why we say we are all emotional, right? That's why we feel love and everything. So the animals feel the same thing as well, but normally we don't think about it. So the basic premise behind factory farming is designating an animal as a property, as something that's lifeless and something that you can, just take away with. But the very idea of taking away life implies that it's a living being and it has its own intrinsic way of doing things and living life. That is something that's incompatible. And secondly, when the slaughter itself has to happen, there are further additional requirements. Because the thing is, you have, in addition to providing safe water and everything else, you have to make sure that the animal must not suffer. That is impossible in the industrial agriculture system as it exists as of today. The other requirement is impossible, which is what tayyib. Tayyib essentially means clean and pure. And the factory farming system can never provide that, like in any way. It's just impossible. So this mass, slaughter of animals happening in these systems is incompatible as a result, but we often don't think about it because we're just confined about feeding people. But the thing is, this feeding exercise is responsible for 30% of our global greenhouse gas emissions. It's responsible for using 50% of our global land across the world. It's responsible for 80% of our contamination of our oceans and waters, something that poor people of underserved communities are living close these areas, so they get affected, and that's environmental racism in a way as well. All of that from a human level is not allowed in Islam explicitly, but we don't make those connections because we confine animals just as property, and we have to go beyond that. So that's something I would mention here.
Thank you so much. Silesh, how about you?
Yeah, in our religion, even when we were consuming dairy, we were told to let the calf finish drinking and then you can take the excess for human consumption. Now, as a child, when I was 7 years old, I overheard my grandmother tell my grandfather that this particular calf is drinking too much. He's not leaving milk for the children. So what should I do? And then my grandfather told my grandmother, don't let him drink to his fill. Pull him away after 10 minutes. And as a child, I knew that there was something wrong going on. Okay. But then I was told that it's necessary to consume dairy. And so I continued consuming. But that was in the back of my mind, causing me so much suffering over the years. I had arthritis, I had sinus problems, I had all kinds of inflammation problems as I was growing up. And I thought it's part of my makeup, my genetic makeup. And then I found out that we don't have to consume dairy for our well-being because there is something called vitamin B12 that we can get in a pill. You don't need to go drink it from a milk, get it from a milk. So when I stopped consuming dairy, all my arthritic pains went away. I had this huge sense of relief from my, that fell off my shoulders, right? All the guilt fell off my shoulders. And this is why I think in Hinduism, it was allowed to consume because I think people didn't know about vitamin B12 way back, and we are the only species that washes its food before eating. And this causes us to go find vitamin B12 from another source. Now that we know, and vitamin B12 was discovered in the 50s or 40s, 1940s or 50s. Now that we know, we can give that up. Because dairy turns out to be the source of cheap beef. It's when the dairy cow is finished giving milk, she gets chopped up and turned into cheap beef because people already paid for her by purchasing dairy. Cheap leather. This kind of exploitation is absolutely against our religion. So I say that, for our food, now that we know about vitamin B12, we should be completely plant-based, 100% plant-based and vegan, and take the supplement that we need to take because we are washing our food. I'm not suggesting that we start eating dirt again, but free the animals. And this is what I would call as sattvic diet. This is the sattvic diet for today, dairy-free. And it turns out that more than 60% of Indians are lactose intolerant. I'm probably one of those because as soon as I stopped consuming dairy, all my arthritic pains went away, all my inflammation problems went away, and I started jumping up and down like I was a 16-year-old again. Thank you.
Thank you. Rabbi Shmuley, how about you?
Well, to start, and I'm really appreciate what was just shared so much. Going back to the Garden of Eden story, the birth of moral consciousness emerges with the first act of food consumption. It is in the eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil where they gain consciousness of morality. That is to say that the quintessential moral choice in our lives is the one that is connected to what we eat. And I think that that's fundamental to that biblical ethos. That people think, oh, I'm moral, I voted for the right candidate. Now, voting is important, but we vote so rarely. And but we vote our values every time we buy food and every time we eat food. And so I think of that Garden of Eden story often. Similar to Altamush with halal, thinking about kashrut. Kashrut is something I'm very committed to. And it is something, sadly, that has, in America, assimilated into corporate America and the worst sides of corporate America, and where the kosher industry is not concerned with animal suffering. The kosher industry and those behind it are concerned with getting as many products certified as possible, financially sustaining the system, making food cheap and good tasting, these kinds of things. And this is a real tragedy. And I wish to kind of reclaim, the beauty of what that tradition was supposed to be about and where I think it can ultimately lead. The last thing I'll say is that in addition to kashrut being a vehicle to fulfill duty and to bring about the right consequences, I think it's also about virtue ethics, about becoming the type of person of character we strive to be. And this is just a crucial part of trying to strive to be more godlike, to emulate the divine.
Thank you so much. With that, we move to our final question. Although I think one of the more important questions that we ask today is, what have you seen be effective in moving people toward veganism within your community? So we'll start with Charanjit.
Thank you. In the scripture, there is reference to 36 types of food, varieties of delicacies, which are considered blessed ones, and none of them contain meat and meat products. And I don't think many Sikhs know it, so it probably is becoming more of my duty to be able to say that. That's what my own community should be considering. Uh, what the faith says and what they actually do, particularly in the Western context. I would also like to get my answer in relation to the other communities with which I'm working as well in the interfaith context. Um, we do here locally in Hounslow, with the help of our local college, which is quite a large establishment, to have an iftar meal. I think this is during the Ramadan period when there is the fasting from morning till evening, dusk till dawn, and then there is the opening of the fast, and usually quite a number of our Muslim communities would have, uh, alongside other things, a meat dish as well. But we decided that we would invite all people over and only serve vegan. And nobody has missed it over the last 3 years because the food is delicious. They are exposed to what vegan type of food can actually provide, what variety there is, what taste there are, what joy there is. And I usually say at the end of the meeting, look, with all this enjoyment, you haven't, um, no animal had to lose its life. Today, this morning, there was as Barbara said, it's Interfaith Week. So we had an interfaith morning with the police and the interfaith community. And the police were saying they wanted to do a cake at 11 o'clock in the morning as part of the 11th swinging. And I said, well, let's have a vegan cake. They had not thought about it previously. I insisted on that. And they all enjoyed it. So there are ways of getting not just your own community engaged, but also other communities engaged by actually making them aware that if we want to share something which everybody can share is much better than I can't eat halal and you can't eat kosher or something like that. It's what we can eat together and share and feel good about it together. That's
Thank,
how I look at it.
thank you so much. I want to make sure we hear from everyone before we leave here. So, Altamash, how about you?
Yeah, so firstly, I just want to thank Charanjit for the amazing example she just gave. I didn't know about that before. Yeah, no wonder veganism is something, that's open to everybody to eat for all religions. That's something really amazing and interesting. But the thing is, when it comes to Islam, I think the first that I want to make clear is that it's a personal choice. And the religion has mostly been about, as a test for people of the Muslim faith to understand and get closer to God. So as I mentioned before, there is of course an allowance in the religion to eat animals. It does exist. There is no mandatory requirement to actually eat them. And the questions that we really need to understand and answer as to why we should not eat them is how is it connected to other life forms or the world itself. I mentioned in my previous answer about disasters, but it is scientifically proven that meat, for example, has the highest carbon footprint in the world. Why is that the case? We have to think about that. And the way the product is made, the way how industrial agriculture happens. Why do we have these problems of environmental racism? Why are we forcing people who are lactose intolerant to drink milk when they cannot do it? As Dr. Sailesh mentioned, why are we relying on these systems, on these food systems, as basically a guide to solve food security when these systems are the reason why we have the food security problem? Why? And this is also scientifically proven because science suggests that 100 calories that we put in these animals and then we grow them up, we use all the land in the world to basically grow crops or food that would essentially go to human beings and solve this huge problem of food security happening across the world. We instead want to feed them to the animals because it makes profit. It's all about business at the very end. And then we eat the animal. And out of those 100 calories, the only calories that we get is 13 or maybe 15. 85% of those calories are lost. If those 85% of those calories went to other human beings, won't the problem that we wanted to actually solve the same system get solved? Why? So these are basically questions that we need to answer. And they're all embedded, essentially to this core question as to how all of this is a test, how all of this kind of aligns within the religion. And at the end of the day, what we actually put on our plate is going to decide whether the person sitting next to us is going to be alive or not. That is true because I've personally seen the 2022 floods that happened in Pakistan, where 1/3 of my entire country was underwater. While this issue has not been particularly discussed, there is science available which suggests that global warming or greenhouse gas emissions was the reason why the floods actually happened. And 30% of those greenhouse gas emissions come from the food system. Why? That's my question. Why don't people think about these things and then connect them as to why this is such an important question for not ourselves, but for every single being that lives with us? These are all scientific questions. So nothing that's, my opinion. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. How about you, Silesh?
Yeah, thank you, Altamash. Actually, I wrote a paper claiming that it's at least 87%, if not more, of greenhouse gas emissions comes from the animal agriculture industry, because there is a lot of miscounting going on in the UN IPCC, because people are trying to hide it in order to continue the system, so to speak. So what I found to be most effective among Hindus, you may find this strange, but it's because when people continue consuming dairy because of the stories of Lord Krishna. Yeah. And it turns out that by explaining the stories of Lord Krishna, I'm able to make a lot of them go vegan. Because the stories of Lord Krishna are all symbolic. Lord Krishna lifted a mountain with his little finger. He danced on the hood of a 7-headed snake. And people don't do that. Don't take those stories literally. They understand that he lifted a mountain with his little finger, meaning if you have faith in Lord Krishna, he will shelter you from the trials of life. He danced at the hood of a 7-headed snake, meaning he overcame the 7 chakras. He overcame the 7 evils and became enlightened. So we understand those stories to be symbolic. But then when it comes to the stories of Lord Krishna and the cow, people take it literally. But in reality, milk is the fluid mind that has doubts about God, and to which you add the thought of God and you churn it, it becomes butter, which is the solid mind that has no more doubts about God. And that is the enlightened mind. So this is why Lord Krishna loves butter. He loves the mind of a devotee. And when I explain it to people, they get it and they understand that they have been deceived into consuming milk, even though they are lactose intolerant by these corporations that are running the planet. So it's about taking back our freedom, taking back our health, becoming healthy ourselves. And that's a basic duty that we all have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Rabbi Shmuley, how about you?
Thank you. Yeah, and Dr. Rao, the paper you wrote on the 87%, I don't know if you have a hyperlink to that where you could post it in the chat or not.
Yeah, I can do that.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I do. So some of the things we're doing at Shemayim in the Jewish Animal Advocacy Movement is we've started a debate program where I will debate any rabbi in their own community about whether Judaism more authentically favors meat eating or veganism, and the winner will receive a $5,000 prize to their organization. So it's most likely their community will vote for them over me, but that is a way to get us into their spaces where people have never even heard these arguments. That's one. We have a synagogue vegan challenge where we give grants to synagogues that offer these vegan meals and to support people tasting this stuff. And then I really believe, well, there really is a place for some of these documentaries of horror that show people what they don't want to see. I also think that I've seen a lot of people go vegan, including myself, based upon positive relationships that are with people who are very kind and very influential, that inspire us to move in that direction. And for us to build community where people can not feel alone when they go vegan, but find in each of our faiths a place to go of peers and friends, and to offer really good food in those spaces so people feel like they're not sacrificing their life. They can still have friends, they can still have great food, they can still have community. And I think that this is something that can be very effective.
Thank you so much. And unfortunately, we do not have time to take extra questions, but I'm going to make sure that wherever this video goes and in my email to those of you who are here, that I will send after, that we have links to where you can learn more from everyone and reach them if you do have a question. But yeah, I just want to thank everyone again. Thank our speakers, thank Barbara and Lisa, and everyone who was here and participated in the chat. And this is the last panel so far in our Interfaith panel series, but I hope that you took some inspiration from it, and let's continue on this movement.